hope everyone has had enough for lunch and that no one's feeling hungry anymore. Because I want to start by talking about McDonald's. Specifically, I want to talk about McDonald's in the mid-1980s. It's very specific. This was at a time when McDonald's wanted to launch a new product. So for the previous 30 years, McDonald's had been based on 3 products. Their success was down to hamburgers, French fries, and sodas. That was the entirety of their product offering for about 30 years. Then in the mid-1980s, they wanted more. They already had about 40% of the market share in the US. They were more than twice the size of the next biggest competitor, but they wanted even more. And their idea to do that was to launch a completely new product. Because at the time, McDonald's was focused on the lunchtime market. People coming, getting a burger, throwing away the wrapping, and then going. What they wanted to do instead was to see, how can we get the evening market as well? But to do that, they would need a new product. They weren't happy to just give people burgers in the evening. They didn't really want that. People wanted to sit down. They wanted to have a more substantial meal together, to eat it a little bit more slowly. So they decided pizzas. Pizzas is the way that we're going to go. They'd seen the rise of companies like Pizza Hut and Domino's Pizza in the US. They knew that there was a potential for them to increase the size of their market by offering this new product. But there are a few problems standing in their way. First of all, cooking a pizza is very different to cooking a burger. Unless you live in Scotland, most people cook a pizza in an oven, not in a deep fat fryer. So the way that they approached it was, okay, we need to have an oven in every restaurant in McDonald's. The problem was, McDonald's is famous for its fast service. And if you cook a frozen pizza in a conventional oven, it's going to take far too long. But this wasn't a problem for McDonald's. They created a completely new type of oven, and they patented it. It took them about 2 or 3 years to produce, but they created a new oven that could cook a pizza in a couple of minutes from frozen, so that was no problem. But there was another issue. Every McDonald's restaurant is built around the same formula, and that has a very tightly controlled use of space in all of their restaurants, especially in the kitchen. Any space that isn't the kitchen should be the restaurant. So that meant that when they created this completely new type of oven, they needed somewhere to put it. So that meant they had to remodel all of the restaurants. And they did this to around 40% of the restaurants in the US. They remodeled all of the kitchens so that they could fit this new oven in. They were almost there. There was just one more problem standing in their way. Quite a simple one. And that is, when people go to a drive-thru at McDonald's, there's a little window that you get given your bag through. These windows were too small to fit a pizza through. And most people, when they hand you a pizza, you want to be handed a pizza like that, not at an angle. So no problem, they fixed the kitchens, they fixed the ovens, they fixed the drive-thru hatch, and they created this. Isn't it beautiful? This is why we've all had lunch, so we're not feeling hungry at this point. They created this whole new product. Their competitors were feeling nervous. Domino's, Pizza Hut were getting nervous. They were starting to advertise against this frozen competitor. Then McDonald's rolled it out. And given that this was 30 years ago, you can probably guess what happened next. Nobody bought it. Nobody wanted to go to McDonald's for pizza. But this was a little bit late for them. So as in the previous presentation where we heard about how companies often invest a huge amount of money in products that nobody wants, I can think of no worse example than this. They literally spent 3 years making an oven to cook this before realizing that nobody actually wanted it. Okay, so we are about 6 or 7 minutes in, and you're probably thinking, what the hell does this have to do with experimentation or conversion optimization or testing? As I see it, success that we have, whether as individuals, companies, organizations, governments, countries, is down to the choices that we make. Every choice that we make defines us. In the example with McDonald's, we could see that they made a series of very, very bad choices without getting the data, without getting the user feedback to determine whether that was the right thing to do. To me, the advantage of experimentation is not in increasing a conversion rate. The advantage of experimentation is being able to make multiple choices at the same time, in being able to validate our response. Because when we do that, then we can create something that can truly change the world, literally. So I'm going to share an example of an experiment that was run about 100 years ago that I hope has affected everyone in this room. and all of our families as well. So this was in the 1920s. This is what experimentation looked like 100 years ago. Experimentation didn't start with Google Website Optimizer or VWO. Experimentation in marketing existed in a form like this. This ad was created by a guy called Claude Hopkins, who was a New York ad man. In 1908, he was paid the equivalent of about $4 million per year in advertising. And despite his massive paycheck, despite his years of experience in advertising, his approach to advertising was not to say, I know the perfect advert for you, this is what we should do. His response was to say, I don't know what to do, so let's validate it with experimentation. So this is what a split test looked like 100 years ago. As you can see, this is for Pepsodent, who make toothpaste. The way that they did experimentation back then, this is obviously before the days of websites or analytics, is to use, as you can see in the bottom, these coupon codes. Because when we zoom in, we can see that there's a very slightly different address on each of them. One is Department 595, the other is Department 510. These adverts would appear in newspapers, in magazines, across the country. 50% of them would have one advert, 50% would have the other, and then they would physically count the number of coupons that they got back to see which advert was the most effective. So this is what testing looked like 100 years ago. Nothing that we're doing today is particularly new. What I enjoy about this experiment is Pepsodent was a relatively new product. Toothpaste was not a particularly common product for people back in the 1910s and 20s. During the First World War, the US declared the state of their soldiers' teeth a national emergency because people just weren't brushing their teeth. But these series of adverts were so popular that they made toothbrushing into a regular habit. And people have been brushing their teeth for 5,000 years. Archaeologists have found 5,000-year-old toothbrushes. They might look a little bit like Andre's. And yet, this created a habit around brushing your teeth that changed, hopefully, most people in this room. And to me, this is the value in experimentation, that it can gather feedback and allow us to make multiple choices at the same time. And that example of Pepsodent is a relatively simple one. It's quite familiar to us. Yes, the advert is in a different medium, but otherwise it's fairly familiar. Let me give you an example of a far more complicated problem, one that doesn't involve advertising or magazines or newspapers, one that involves an environment where it's almost impossible to run an experiment. Specifically, this is for an aid organization from the Netherlands. So they were looking to help people in Kenya, specifically rural Kenya, to increase their educational standards. They wanted to support students in Kenya. And the kind of standard approach to education through aid organizations at the time was, step one, you buy a load of textbooks. Step two, you hand out the textbooks to as many people as you can. And step three, you call it a good job done. That was pretty much how educational aid looked in the mid-1990s. But this Dutch NGO wanted to test a different approach. They weren't convinced that textbooks were making all of the difference that people thought they should be doing. So, as you can probably guess, they ran an experiment. They worked with the Kenyan government to create two groups of schools. They randomly chose two groups of school. In one group, they got the textbooks. In the other group, they got nothing. Sometimes the easiest experiment is to do nothing at all. But in no way should this be considered to be an easy experiment. This is an organization that is working with the Kenyan government to improve educational standards that can only be measured over the course of multiple months. And you can probably guess where this is going. They ran this experiment and they found that there was no difference between the two groups. Getting the textbooks made no difference to the students. And what they found was, actually most of these students don't speak English, and yet all of the textbooks are written in English. So this was a little bit of a problem. Not to worry, they ran another experiment. This time they threw out the textbooks and they made posters, flip charts, so educational resources that didn't rely on language to communicate, and this covered maths and geography and science and so on. They ran another experiment, again over multiple months. They found the exact same thing. There was zero difference between the two groups. So they ran a third experiment, and this experiment had a massive impact on the conversion rate, on the performance of these students academically. But it had nothing to do with textbooks or posters or flip charts. Instead, they gave out worming medication. because parasitic infections were common in this part of Kenya. And when the students were infected, it meant that they were often lethargic, that they would miss school, and as a result, their academic performance would suffer. But by giving out this medicine, they resisted the infections, they stayed in school far more, and the performance boosted. And this is what I like about experimentation. It allows us to challenge these kind of assumptions. Assumptions like textbooks are the right way to manage aid in Kenya. And it allows us to test radical concepts. So we're just essentially distilling quite a complex, big problem like foreign aid to improve education and running a simple experiment that can then be scaled accordingly. So as you can see, there's nothing new about what we're doing today, but everything is changing. What I mean by that is that the data, the insight, the analysis that we have today is far different than it ever was before. In Nicholas's presentation earlier, he shared a slide with the kind of marketing technology landscape, all of the tools that are available to us. Obviously, Claude Hopkins 100 years ago did not have this. This slide is a little bit of a clue. Does anyone want to guess when the first documented split test was, the first documented experiment? Preferably someone who I wasn't talking to in the bar last night. This picture is a clue. Any guesses? Very good, 2,500 years ago. So this is a picture of Daniel, of the book of Daniel fame in the Old Testament. This is the first documented split test that I could find. There may well be others, but this is the first I could find, where he talks about the king of Babylon dividing servants into two groups, one group getting the noble food, the meat, the wine, and so on, the other group getting vegetables and water, and then monitoring the performance of those two groups. Nothing about experimentation is new. But what is new is the data that is available to us, the ability to run split tests at a scale that we haven't seen before. There are only three core elements to running experiments. At its core, we need to be able to hypothesize. To create a hypothesis around an experiment, we need to be able to analyze the data, and ideally, not essentially, but ideally we need to be able to iterate. Because as in the example in Kenya, it's when we iterate that we can really start to challenge assumptions and to build on what we understand. These are three very, very simple elements. Take the first one, hypothesize. This is the hypothesis framework that we use at conversion.com. There are plenty of other ones available. I highly recommend Craig Sullivan's approach, which we took a lot from to create this. This is the approach that we use when we're optimizing a landing page, a form, a website, a mobile app. But what we found in the last couple of years is you can apply this to anything. So we know other companies who are using this exact same framework to optimize their SEO campaigns. We're now using it to help companies test packaging, to test their pricing, to test which products they should launch next. So this whole approach to experimentation is changing, and at the core is this hypothesis. To finish up, I want to share a few quick examples of how people are applying experimentation today. So the history lesson is over. None of these examples are from 2,000 years ago. These are all from the last 1 or 2 years. The first one is from a company called Lost My Name. Does anyone know this company? Excellent. Pep, I'm sure you do. So Lost My Name is a company who make children's books. They're very, very highly illustrated, highly personalized children's books. I highly recommend them. They've got quite a complex operation because to create a beautiful, personalized children's book, and these are all based around a child's name, is quite a complex operation. What they found is that a lot of people were buying these products as a gift. And so a lot of their revenue, a lot of their profit was coming not from the books, but from the upsells, things like the gift wrap. And going back about 1.5 years, they only had one type of gift wrap, this one, the monkey gift wrap. And if you look in the middle, I don't know if I have a pointer. I do. There's a little cheeky tongue fastener. So the tongue is how you fasten the gift wrap. It's very cute. But they had a hypothesis, which is, okay, we've only got one type of gift wrap, the cheeky monkey gift wrap. What if people want a different type of gift wrap? What if they're buying it as a present for someone who isn't a cheeky monkey? Maybe we should create another type of gift wrap instead. The problem that they faced was, to create this new type of gift wrap, it seems kind of simple, but then you think, okay, they've got multiple printing outfits across the world, multiple distributors. To create this new type of gift wrap was quite a complex proposition. And the last thing that they'd want to do is to make the same mistake that McDonald's did, to create a product that no one wants. So you can probably guess where this is going. They ran a split test. What's different about the split test is it's not like a normal experiment. What's different here is that the product on the right, the confetti gift wrap, the more neutral one, doesn't actually exist. So if you clicked on that product, you wouldn't be able to buy it. Instead, it would open a message saying, sorry, we don't have the confetti gift wrap coming soon, or it's not available today, but you can still get the monkey gift wrap instead. What they're able to do with this experiment then was to see, okay, what percentage of people will want to add that gift wrap? Is it going to be 1%, 5%, 20%? Because based on that data, they'd then be able to determine which product they should invest in. Should they invest in this product? Should they invest somewhere else? We only have a limited number of resources available to us. And again, our success is down to the choices that we make. So rather than making a single choice and then living or dying by it, instead, they ran it as an experiment and got that data first. What they found is, okay, actually, no one really wanted the confetti gift wrap. They doubled down on the product that they already had and invested that resource elsewhere. In the last couple of minutes, let me share one more example. This is from a Dutch company called Vanmoof. Is anyone familiar with them? Excellent. So they make bicycles. What's different about them is that they want to sell 90+% of their bicycles online. So rather than going into a store and buying it, they want to sell it online. What that requires is, if you're buying a bicycle online, they have to send the bicycle to you. And a couple of years ago, they had a problem, which is they were sending out all of these bicycles to their customers, but by the time the bicycle arrived at the customer's house, it was often damaged. 30, 40+% of the bicycles were being damaged as a result of the couriers. And they tried to fix it in the normal way. They tried changing couriers. They tried different packaging to support the bicycle better, but nothing that they did made any difference. So instead, they tried something completely different. And this is where I love the value of experimentation, because it doesn't just apply to landing pages or websites. It applies to everything, even something as simple as a cardboard box. You can probably see what they've done. Rather than having a picture of a bicycle or the branding on the box, instead, they put a picture of a widescreen TV. Because they knew that the couriers that were delivering their bicycles and damaging them were the same couriers who were delivering TVs and somehow managing to not damage them. So they thought, why don't we just put a picture of a TV on the box and see what impact that has? And sure enough, damages fell through the floor. This was the most successful thing that they'd done. And in fact, they got quite a lot of media attention for this as well. It was quite a novel approach. They got so much attention, in fact, that they started to sell the box on its own. If you look closely down at the bottom, I appreciate this is maybe a little bit awkward, but you can see that the box costs an astonishing $748. The reason for that is that the box comes with a free bicycle with every order. There's just one more example that I want to share just as we finish up. I want to take it all the way back to the beginning, to McDonald's. If you go into most McDonald's now, you won't order face-to-face with a human. You'll normally be tapping your order into one of these terminals instead. There are hundreds of thousands of these terminals across the world. And what that gives McDonald's is the ability to experiment at a scale that is unprecedented. So if they want to run a test, if they want to test a new product, in the past, they might have just added it to the menu and then seen whether people order it. That's quite a complex thing to do. Now they can, very, very simply, because this is an HTML interface, they can roll out experiments very quickly. So if, suppose McDonald's want to test a sourdough bun as an upgrade, something quite banal like that, would people pay £1, $1, €1 to upgrade their bun to a sourdough bun? Instead of actually making that product, they can follow what Lost My Name did in creating this kind of fictional product. They can just add it to 1% of these terminals to see, will people actually show an interest in it? Will they try and add it to their basket? And this is a challenging question because, on the one hand, everything that we should be doing is focused on user experience, on improving the user experience. And something like this is purposefully damaging the user experience. Lost My Name will have upset customers who wanted to buy the confetti gift wrap, but had to make do with a monkey gift wrap. But the advantage is we only have a limited amount of resource, and success is a result of the choices that we make. And so it's far better to get this insight early, to use the experimentation as a way of validating the choices that we make, than investing in something that people don't want. So ultimately, in a fast-changing world, experimentation can become our unfair advantage. Thank you.